This lecture is being brought to you in part by the generous gifts of these sponsors.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right in the back? Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This has been a long time in the making, and I'm excited to share a lot of new updates to the medical research field. And also, I think, importantly, we often forget that all the great discoveries we've made in neuroscience, medical research, psychology, psychiatry over the last, 100 years, 50 years, while it's great that we can apply them in the clinic, it's great that us doctors can give better patient care to our patients because of these discoveries, we also need to do a better job of passing that knowledge down to everyone else. And there needs to be, because a lot of the things that you'll see from this presentation in particular are discoveries that don't just change the way we treat patients, they change the way we treat ourselves. And they change the way we heal, and the way we think about healing, and the way we think about trauma and illness in the first place. So I'm going to walk you through a couple things that kind of set the tone for the conversation today. And I like to call this Dr. Dave's mind blowers. So these are the kinds of things that we don't usually think about, but that are actually possible. So the question that I use to frame up this conversation is, what if it were possible? What if we could close our eyes and put ourselves into a state of believing, despite everything else we might have heard before, that it's actually possible to cure at least one mental illness by 2030. Okay? So that's what we're going to think about and keep in our minds for today. Because up until this point, we have never had cures for mental illness, and myself and all of my colleagues in the field who are the experts, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the therapists, we're basically taught to not use the cure word. They call it the C word with our patients. We're taught, thank you so much, we're taught not to use it. We're taught to talk about treatment. We're talk about long-term remission, talk about treatment goals. Treatment is for life, but we can do better than that. And I hope you'll also be convinced by the end of this conversation. So I want to take us back now, say maybe 100 million years, 50, or I should say, since there's a human in this picture, let's say 100,000 years, to when humans first came and started to inhabit the earth. And we didn't have the same kinds of stressors that we have today. We had different stressors. And our nervous system evolved to deal with the kind of stress we had back then. And the kind of stress we had back then, 100,000 years ago, and 50,000 years ago, and probably up until, maybe the last 500 years that started to change, or 1,000 years. But we had things like lack of food, lack of air, lack of water, lack of shelter, protective shelter, sleep deprivation, and lack of human connection. And the reason why it's important to understand these 6 points of survival is because this is how our nervous system evolved to function. And not just our nervous system, but every single mammal that has a nervous system. So now we're going back 100 million, 200 million years. Every single mammal that we know about, every single animal that nurses its young, has evolved a nervous system that is to take care of these things and make sure that we always have access to these things on a consistent basis. And that is how our nervous system evolved to define safety, is when we have all these boxes checked. As soon as one of these boxes is unchecked, our nervous system starts to get a little concerned, right? That's when our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, maybe we start to sweat from our palms, our shoulders go up to protect the neck, right? All of these things we're all familiar with. But that's only supposed to happen when one of these boxes is unchecked. However, today, we don't have those same kinds of threats on a regular basis. We have too many emails, too many pings, too much screen time, too much news, too many responsibilities, too many places to be, too much noise, right? This is financial stress, legal stress. This is very different. But the important thing to note is that our body does not know the difference. Our mind knows the difference, between ancient stressors that we evolved to deal with and what we have to deal with today in modern life. So modern survival threats trick our body into thinking that we are under threat like we were in the past to one of these things. And so the response in the body is the same. With overstimulation, financial stress, legal stress, too much news, too many pings, too many screens, we are still activating increased heart rate, increased fight or flight nervous system activity, increased blood pressure, and all the things in our bodies that are trying to get us away from a lion. But there is no lion, it's just a laptop. And the reason why this happens is because we evolved this very specific part of the brain called the amygdala. That's in this little red box here. And the amygdala, I'm going to take you back another couple 100 million years, is a particularly interesting part of the brain because we call it the reptilian brain. Probably a lot of you have heard of the reptilian brain. It's called the reptilian brain because it exists all the way back to reptiles. So now we're going back this is now 200-300 million years, that these same brain structures that govern all behavior are still in us, right? So think about that for a moment. I think that's quite a humbling thing to think about, that our brains learn about fear and safety the same exact way that ancient multi-hundred-year-old animals, mammals, and reptiles learned about safety and fear, which is how we make all the meaning that we make from the world, and almost all of it is governed by what's in this tiny little red box. It's pretty incredible. And this is bigger and more evolved in humans than any other animal, but we all have it, something like it. And we talk about the amygdala in a way that I think is really confusing to people, because we talk about it like it's the fear center of the brain, because fear sets it off. Fear increases activity in the amygdala. But I think it's more important to think about the amygdala as what is the signal of fear that it is detecting. Fear is the emotional response we have, but what it's actually detecting is newness and uncertainty, which is what's happening in the environment that makes us think we might need to be afraid right now. So we evolved again, 100,000 years ago, you're wandering in with your family in the prairies, and all of a sudden something new and loud flashes by your peripheral vision. You're going to want to tune into that right away, because it's uncertain and you have no idea what it could be, and it could mean your immediate demise. It could mean the end of your family line back then. So this part of the brain is not just overactive because it's detecting things that are actually threatening to us. It's accidentally getting overactivated because it's stimulated with too much newness, too much uncertainty, too much information coming in all at once. We are the most overstimulated generation our collective generation in the history of humanity. In the first half an hour of waking up, when you look at your phone, we intake, because I've done it too, we intake as much information as the average human being took in 1 week of being alive in the 1950s. By looking at your phone for 1/2 hour when you wake up. A week's worth of 1950s information. That is way too much to take in first thing in the morning. And then that's compounded by every single time we continue to do that as we move on throughout the day. So we're really overstimulated, and that poor amygdala is really getting thrown out of whack. And so what it does when the amygdala gets overactivated is it evolved to create an important signal. When we experience newness, when we experience uncertainty, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to feel restless. We're supposed to feel anxious, right? Why? Not because anxiety is bad. It's because anxiety is a critical survival signal that is neither good nor bad. It's a neutral signal that says, hey, pay attention to this thing right now. But if we grow up thinking and being taught that anxiety is bad, every time we feel it, we're like, oh, I need to go do something else to distract myself from this feeling or to make this feeling go away. That's not how anxiety goes away. And anybody who's tried to escape from anxiety knows that as soon as your escape, distraction, or numbing wears off, you notice your anxiety again quite fully. And the reason why is because anxiety is a survival signal. And it's from the amygdala telling us, hey, pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. There's something that needs your attention. And it might only need your attention for like 30 or 60 or 90 seconds, but it needs your attention. And when we think about things, because we only have so much time every day to think about anything, so when we think about things we can't control during that precious time, guess what? We feel more out of control more of the time. Out of controlness equals uncertainty, equals fear, equals amygdala activation, right? So we have control of our attention, and this starts to get back into like some of the most interesting Buddhist and Eastern and tribal practices, which is that our attention is how we control our perspective and our sense of reality and ultimately our health, because we have the choice to decide what we pay attention to in any moment. So we can pay attention to things that we don't have control over and feel out of control, or we can literally say, nope, I'm just gonna watch that news story or that thing go by, and I'm just gonna redirect my attention to my breath, something I have control over right now. And anyone can do this with me right now if you like. You can just close your eyes and take a nice deep breath in and just feel the air filling your lungs. And you don't have to do anything else other than just notice the air coming in and then leaving. And if you do one more, you'll really feel it. Just close your eyes and take a nice deep breath in through your nose and just feel the air filling your lungs as much as you can. And then big sigh out for 5 seconds. So as you do that, you have just redirected your attention to something that you can control in any moment. And when you do that, guess what? You feel more in control more of the time. Anxiety starts to dissipate and fade away. And that's something this is ironically in our control. So these are some of the core, when we look at like evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, how we think about the world and ourselves comes from. This is where it comes from. And this is how we fix it, by understanding where it comes from. So the history is really, really important. Evolutionary biology, the way that we evolved to be what we are, is really important to understand, because we are just like the animals, and we can actually, and especially this nervous system part, we can understand how to function at a much higher level by actually taking ourselves down a notch and recognizing that we're a lot more like the animals than we think we are. So that's really important to consider. So, and being able to remind ourselves that we, unlike the animals, have one special feature: we can decide where our attention is at any moment. So if we have the ability to decide where our attention is, we should be making the conscious decision to attend to things that we can control and attend less to things that we can't. Most things in the world we can't control, and I'll get to the things that we can. And this has an impact on our nervous system. So basically, thinking about things we can't control, as one example, thinking about the news, thinking about what other people think about you, this trains our fight or flight nervous system to be overactive all the time. So the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system governs all the blood flow going to your heart, your lungs, your motor cortex of your brain, your amygdala, to get us out of a fight or flight survival situation. So we don't need emotion control, so that goes out the window. We don't need sleep when we're running from a lion, that goes out the window. We don't need focus, we need tunnel vision to get us out of that situation, not broad views of things. And then our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, and we are getting out of there. So all the things that are not needed for for explicit survival get deprioritized in the body. And so how do we restore that? Well, we restore that by reminding ourselves that we're safe. So safety is actually has a biological signature. And safety is increased vagus nerve activity, increased parasympathetic tone, which is the opposite of fight or flight. It's the rest and digest nervous system. And so this part of the nervous system can be increased with slow, deep breathing, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, biofeedback, soothing touch, soothing music, making eye-to-eye contact and smiling at one another, Apollo, which we'll talk about later. And all of those activities, and even better when combined, increase emotion control. They improve sleep, they improve focus, they improve heart rate variability and blood pressure and heart rate. So we are not that far off. We already know what works. And all of these things work to improve the functioning of the nervous system because they're all boosting vagus nerve activity. They're all targeting the recovery nervous system. And to give you an idea, again, you have to remember all of this, but I just use this slide to illustrate that these two systems, the sympathetic fight or flight system that's triggered by fear and stress and uncertainty, and the parasympathetic rest and digest system, are two parts of the same us, same nervous system, and they're constantly in balance for resources because there's only so much blood to go around at any moment. Our body has to rapidly divert blood flow to whatever organ systems need it most in that moment. Most of us don't realize that's going on because it happens so seamlessly that we are oblivious. However, there are certain times where we really notice this, like when you eat a huge meal and you're so full that all the blood rushes to your stomach and your gut, and you can barely think and stay awake. You just get knocked out, right? Almost everybody has had that experience at Thanksgiving. That's all of your blood flow going to the parasympathetic system, and your fight or flight system, your sympathetic system, is completely inactive. Or not completely, but a lot inactive. And these are in balance. So it's literally just a blood flow balance. And that blood flow balance, interestingly enough, is governed primarily by us. So that's why it says me in the middle, because by changing our breath, by changing our movement choices, by changing our choices, the way we think about the world, the way we think about ourselves, we can actually dynamically shift this system and adjust the balance. And we can do it in real time. And this is what ancient Eastern and tribal traditions have been teaching for thousands of years. It's what Hippocrates, the founder of Western medicine, talked about, Maimonides. This is not new. What's new is science has now proven that this is real. That's what's really fascinating. This is old stuff that modern Western science has now proven definitively, neuroscience has proven, this is how this system is working, and we can change it. We are in control. And that's kind of the theme of today, is we are in control of a lot more than we think we are. And I think it's important to bring up this paper because, again, another mind blower is that many of us were taught that depression is caused by a neurotransmitter imbalance that you're born with. And if people tell you, which I was taught as well, that many people are born with a neurotransmitter imbalance that causes depression or anxiety disorders, and then it's implied that it's genetic, which was taught for a long time, then we can't really do anything about it other than take medicine all the time because we're stuck with this condition forever. Turns out, many of us suspected that was not true, and it turns out this massive umbrella study with over 100,000 people looking at, it was like a meta-analysis of meta-analyses, so it's like one of the biggest kinds of data conglomeration studies you can do. And this was done at University College of London, and they showed that it's not actually low serotonin or any kind of neurotransmitter imbalance is not statistically significant in people with depression. You can't say that just because you have depression, you have a neurotransmitter imbalance. Data doesn't show that. What does it show? Most people who have depression have had a past traumatic event that was unresolved, unprocessed. Trauma, it's more likely if you have depression that you had a past traumatic event than that you have a neurotransmitter imbalance. That's what we as clinicians suspected for a very long time, but we got thrown off for a couple decades. So what's also interesting about this study is when they looked at treatment outcomes. It turns out that SSRI antidepressants perform worse for depression treatment than exercise. Surprise, surprise. Some of us might have suspected that already. But it's really important when you look at the data. And so when we think about how the biological theory of serotonin imbalance causing mental illness is generally speaking across the board incorrect, and that most mental illness, including depression, is likely due to having a history of past traumatic events, having been treated properly. And the medications that we're using to treat these illnesses are not really working for folks who have a significant trauma history. To give you an idea, we see like 70% of people who have a very significant trauma history never enter full remission on medication alone. They require therapy. So it means 70% of people are always stuck with their diagnosis, hence lifelong treatment. It kind of forces us as scientists and doctors to think, well, maybe we need to redefine trauma, right? Maybe the way we're thinking about trauma isn't 100% consistent with what we now know. And so we went back and we reviewed all the literature and we came up with an updated definition of trauma. And This is the definition, the evidence-based modern definition I would offer you, which is that traumatic experiences are intense, high-density experiences, meaningful, challenging experiences over time where we perceived ourselves to be threatened. There was no safety, and for which we did not have adequate support afterwards. And when we have this combination, preparation or support, but support being more important, and the combination of these two things results in a more negative reference to self and the world, a sense of self feeling often a sense of victimization, and we see that the nervous system records these memories as reduced vagus nerve activity, reduced vagal tone. So that's the signature, which corresponds with learned fear. So then if we think about redefining trauma, we also need to redefine healing, because we're seeing people heal in different ways, not with medicine as much, but with therapy. And so healing experiences redefined in this modern update is kind of interesting because it's actually not that different from what the definition of traumatic experiences is. Healing experiences are still meaningful, they're still intense, they're still challenging, but we're safe when we have them. And when we're safe when we have them and we have adequate preparation and support afterwards, again, emphasis on support, what's really interesting is we see that there's a different outcome. People might have extreme hardship, but then they have safety and support after. All of a sudden, they have a positive reference toward themselves in the world. They're like, I can do anything, right? Some of us have had these experiences or known people who have faced incredible hardship and overcome, and overcome, like jumped to another level as a result of overcoming. And we've seen examples of that many, many times. But this has its own signature in the body, which is increased vagus nerve activity. It's literally the opposite of what we see with trauma. And it results from learning or relearning safety. And the vagus nerve gets increased in activity when we relearn safety. So again, just to reiterate, if trauma results in our bodies and minds learning fear, which is the clinical and scientific definition of what's happening in our bodies are learning fear as a result of experiencing traumatic events, then we heal from trauma by unlearning fear, or we call it extinguishing fear, and relearning safety. So this is the key point here. And what's even more interesting is that indigenous and Eastern tribal cultures, again, have known about this for thousands of years. So I think it's really important to shout out to them because they knew how to do this. And they've been managing chronic mental illnesses in this way for thousands of years. We're just figuring out how to explain now what they have been doing and how it works. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about neuroplasticity, which is how we learn. And there's 4 really important things to understand, 4 more mind blowers for you, that are really important to understand what neuroplasticity is, because it's one of the most important things that our brains and bodies do on a regular basis. Neuroplasticity is our fancy neuroscience word for learning. That's it. Just means learning. And there are 3 neurobiological processes that occur when we learn new things. The first is neurogenesis. This is making new neurons. That happens throughout our whole lives, but not that regularly. It's happening all the time, but it's a slow process. Neuroregeneration is the recovering of old neurons. Synaptogenesis is what's happening a lot, all the time. And this is making new connections between existing neurons. So this is what we're going to talk about most today, because this is the most interesting piece, because it's happening literally every moment of our entire lives at a very rapid rate. Anytime we learn anything new, or anytime we repeat anything, we are making new connections through synaptogenesis. And it happens every moment of our lives. And so there are 4 key principles that I want you to try to remember and take away that are really important, because they were not taught to us correctly, they were not taught to me correctly. And if we don't remember these, then it's really hard to come out and really understand the framework of healing that we're moving into in the 21st century. So principle number 1 is that the mind and the body are intimately and intricately connected. They are not separate. Separation, the concept of separation, was an experiment by Descartes in the 1600s. This is what's actually happening. The mind and the body are intimately connected. This means when we feel physically ill for an extended period of time and we don't do anything about it, we can then become mentally and emotionally ill. When we feel mentally ill for an extended period of time, we don't do anything about it, we can manifest physical symptoms. There is a clear, direct connection between mind and body. Principle number 2 is that practice makes mastery. So this is what I was talking about earlier with going back to reptiles, is that Eric Kandel, raise your hand if you've heard of Eric Kandel. Oh, it's pretty good group. So most people did not raise their hands, which is astonishing, not because it surprises me, but because most people don't know Eric Kandel, but it's because of how badly this information about these discoveries is taught. Eric Kandel is somebody you have to remember because he won the Nobel Prize in 2000 with a couple other fantastic scientists who, as a Holocaust survivor, decided to study memory. And when he went and spent his entire life as both a Holocaust survivor as a child and a neuropsychiatrist, he was able to figure out how memory works by studying these little guys right here, our little sea snail friends called Aplysia sea snails, 300 million years older than us. And when he studied these sea snails, he found that they have, in their brains, the same kinds of neurons connecting when they learn things that we do, and they learn based on fear and safety. Safety makes them go back. Safety makes them want more. Safety makes them bodies heal and recover. Fear, the opposite. It makes them recoil. It makes them run away. It increases inflammation. It makes them avoid. They respond to fear and safety just like we do, and with almost the identical neural pathways and neurotransmitters. And they are much, much older than us. So this is really important to note because what Eric Kandel discovered, amongst many other things, is that what our moms and dads told us growing up is true. That if we practice doing anything, we get better at it. Anything. Practice makes perfect. And I don't like to say perfect because perfect doesn't exist, but practice makes mastery, right? So anything we do, whether it's good for us, bad for us, constructive, destructive, makes us happy, makes us sad, accurate, inaccurate, whatever it is that we do, we get better at. So when we practice lifting weights in the gym like this, right? We're strengthening our biceps and the connections to our biceps from our brain. We're getting better at that. If you walk out and practice looking at somebody in the eye who's a stranger walking down the street and saying, hey, hope you're having a nice day. You're practicing expressing gratitude and human connection, and you're getting better at that. If you practice thinking about how you always have a bad memory and you can't remember anything, you're going to get really good at not remembering stuff, right? So like it goes both ways. And it's trainable. That's the key. And we can train ourselves to do anything. Principle number 3 is that sleep is essential. It's not optional. Many of us also grew up learning that we can sleep when we're dead. I remember I used to say that too, especially in medical school. But sleep is essential for memory and essential for learning. So if we are not sleeping and getting good, deep, restful sleep, then we're not getting memory reconsolidation and consolidation in the first place from happening. And that's where our brain takes all the stuff we learned that day and that's stored in short-term memory and then sends it all the way up to be organized into the right places in long-term memory. So if we don't get deep sleep and REM sleep, that process doesn't happen. And a bunch of the stuff that came into the short-term memory in the hippocampus decides to just get tossed out because there's no time for it to get consolidated into the general overall memory and story of our lives. It just kind of it's too much. Okay, I can't deal with it. This is just going to get tossed out for now. So we need that deep and REM sleep to be able to store memories properly. And this has been shown in many studies that people who sleep better and get more REM sleep especially have much better recall. Principle number 4 is that learning and memory occur on 5 levels. This is also a Kandel-related discovery. So it's not just us saying, hey, I remember you, or I remember this experience. It's, I remember what it feels like to touch the stove when it's hot, right? It's not just us remembering that feeling and that experience. Our organ systems remember that experience. Our skin has a memory of being burned when we touch the stove as an organ system. The skin cells, the individual cells that make up the skin have a memory of what it feels like to be stressed with that kind of heat. Those cells make proteins that have their own memory, that persist over time, that help govern how the cell works. And then even beneath the proteins are epigenetics, which is the code that sits on top of our DNA that says, hey, we're exposed to an intense heat stressor, again, turn up your inflammatory and stress response proteins, we need to heal the skin really fast, right? And so, the epigenetics tell our DNA to code for the proteins, that tells the cells how to function, that tells the organ systems how to function, that tells us what to do. Pull away from the stove, go get some ice, right? So these memories are stored on all these levels. It's not just up here, it's not just in our neurons, it's all the way through the whole thing. And memories can be inherited across generations, which is what is the summary of this, which we did not know before. But what we now know is that through epigenetic code, which is stored on our DNA, that code also gets passed into our sperm and egg cells. And so at least a portion of it, like 50%. And so when we have offspring, our offspring can inherit, for instance, trauma memory in the form of epigenetic changes to cortisol receptor genes. So if I've experienced traumatic events, this is Rachel Yehuda's discovery, if I've experienced significant traumatic events in my life that I haven't processed and dealt with and healed from, and I have a child, my child will be very likely to inherit the epigenetic markings that I have that make their cortisol receptors not work properly, which increases their likelihood of developing mental illness, even though they didn't do anything. And it's not genetic, it's epigenetic. It's on the genes. On the genes means we can change it. In the genes, genetic means we cannot change it, at least not easily. On the genes means we can change it. So this is a key differentiator. Epi means on the genetics. So the epigenetic code, again, is responsive to the environment. So I'm just summarizing these principles again for you in case you missed them. Mind and the body are connected. Practice makes mastery. Sleep is essential for learning, and learning and memory occur on our DNA and can be inherited. So now I'm going to go into a brief history of psychedelic medicines, very brief, because we can learn so much about how our minds and bodies work and how we learn from psychedelic medicines and the way they work. Psyche means mind. Delos, this is like one of the most misunderstood words of all. Psyche means mind, delos means to show or to reveal. This does not mean crazy 70s dance party or rave. These are healing medicines. And this term was coined by Aldous Huxley and Humphrey Osmond in the 1950s because there was no good word to adequately describe the healing experiences that they and others were having from the use of these medicines. So these are mind-revealing medicines. So what this means is the same state, if you think about what is a psychedelic state, if you've never experienced it, you have, it's a dream. Dreams are the very first psychedelic states any of us experience because during those states, our subconscious and unconscious material is revealed to our awareness. That is what psychedelic means. So psychedelics are temporary drug-induced dream states that facilitate access to subconscious and unconscious material that typically lives beneath our awareness that can be used for profound healing. It can also be disturbing if not used properly, because these medicines amplify awareness non-specifically. So they increase awareness of all things, not just good or bad or pleasurable or comfortable, but also sometimes uncomfortable things. And I think the main purpose of, the main takeaway is these states do not require drugs to access. So we can access them with meditation, yoga, soothing touch, sexual interactions, intimacy, orgasm, deep breathing, all different kinds of awe-inspiring experiences, watching a great sunset, sailing, the list goes on. And synthetic psychedelic medicines like LSD and MDMA were discovered in search of new therapies for treatment-resistant illnesses. Long ago, like 70 years ago, I think LSD was discovered in 38, right? So these medicines were discovered very, very long ago because scientists and doctors like me were searching for new treatments for illnesses that just wouldn't get better. And then the psychedelic effects were discovered by chance. But what was so interesting was that almost every single mental health medication you've ever heard of, SSRIs, tricyclic antidepressants, MAOIs, antipsychotics, SNRIs, and many other common pharmaceuticals were discovered that we use today were discovered because of this discovery of LSD. And because when Albert Hofmann discovered LSD, he discovered the impact of LSD on the serotonin system and how it works on the serotonin system. And we really had almost no knowledge of the serotonin system at all at that point. So this discovery led to the downstream creation of basically the entire field of biological psychiatry. Meanwhile, LSD and many of the other psychedelic medicines were misused and abused and ended up getting moved out of the research purview, unfortunately. And it was very much a racist decision. It was based on and Nixon talks about this on his famous in-office recordings, which we are so lucky to have because no presidents do that anymore. Perfect example of narcissistic personality disorder. You record yourself having nefarious conversations in your own office to hear your own voice for posterity. So he recorded amazing conversations talking about how there was nothing about psychedelics or cannabis it was dangerous about them. They were making them illegal. They made them illegal to prosecute anti-Vietnam War protesters and minorities and arrest the leaders of those groups because they had a feeling that those people were using these drugs. And so now we're finally coming back from that. We're still not quite there, but we actually have clinical trials now of these medicines. And I think it's really important to take away that these two medicines look very different, right? Look at these molecular structures. There's certain similarities. They have an indole ring. They have a couple other things that look similar, but they're pretty different. Oops. But what's so interesting is how similar the outcomes are from the studies with people with trauma and depression, is that both MDMA, which is 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, it's an amphetamine-derived psychedelic that selectively activates the emotional cortex. Psilocybin comes from the mushroom, no processing, just from nature. And both of them have profound reductions of symptoms with just 1 to 3 doses. Patients report dramatically improved sense of safety with both, improved feelings of connection to self and others, and rated as one of the most meaningful experiences of their entire lives with 1 dose. One of the most meaningful experiences of my entire life. When was the last time you felt that taking a medicine a doctor gave you? So these are all now in trials, and they're moving forward. But I think it's important to understand how paradigm shifting this is, because this is not taught. This wasn't taught to me. This came from research into the work that was being done, that unfortunately also many medical boards aren't teaching, and medical schools aren't teaching because it's so new. But this is what we're seeing. This is an antibiotic level effect for a drug for a mental health disorder called PTSD. So typically, we know what happens. You give somebody medicine, you give them many medicines and therapy, and 70% of those people still have symptoms many years out. In the phase 2 FDA trial of MDMA, 2 months post-treatment, this is 3 doses of medicine only for 12 weeks. 3 doses of medicine, 42 hours of psychotherapy over 12 weeks. That's it, with 2 therapists. And at 2 months post-treatment, 52% of those people were no longer meeting diagnostic criteria for PTSD, and these people had treatment-resistant PTSD from the first group. They were the first group people, receiving traditional treatment, and they had treatment-resistant PTSD on average for 17.6 years. Not responded to anything. 2 months out, 52% are in full remission. 3 doses of medicine, not every day, 3 doses. 27% of the placebo group also responded and was in remission, which is amazing because that shows how good the therapy experience is, the psychotherapy part. But what's most interesting is the 12-month data. This is what we've never seen with any mental health medicine ever, which is that at 12 months after treatment ended, with no additional treatment, more people in the treatment group are better than they were 2 months out. We have never been taught that that effect was even possible in a mental illness, where people could continue to get better. More people would continue to enter remission and continue to be better, making themselves better, making better choices, right? You can almost narrow it down to just making better choices because they feel better. And that number went up from 52% to 67% over the course of 1 year. So more people were better without any additional treatment after just 3 doses and 12 weeks of therapy, while over 50% of the placebo group relapsed. So that's where you see the impact of the medicine, the real impact. And this is paradigm shifting for the field of psychiatry. We have never seen anything like it, except for ketamine, which is the closest thing that is currently legal and available right now. I know Dr. Jonathan Edwards is in the audience somewhere. If anybody has a chance to check out his book, he's one of the foremost experts on ketamine. He's given a talk up here too. And ketamine is fascinating because it has been around for over 70 years. It's used in first responders currently. It's used in the military. It's used to anesthetize children and pregnant women and people who are not good candidates for traditional anesthesia because it's so well tolerated and so overall gentle compared to some of the other anesthetics we use in the OR. And it's FDA approved for treatment-resistant depression. It can be delivered via teletherapy, meaning we can deliver it to patients who don't have the ability to come into the office. Over Zoom, it's that safe. Pharmacy could ship it to your house. It only lasts an hour. And I think what's most interesting though is this last bullet, which is that ketamine is the only medication that we have that is a potently active, acutely active, meaning in the moment, like within the 24-hour period, antidepressant, anti-suicidal agent. So just think about anyone who you know who's suffering from depression and how long, or suicidal thoughts, and how long they might have been suffering from, and knowing that they don't want to start medication because it might be 4 to 12 weeks of misery with an SSRI before they start to feel better, and a good chance it may or may not work, who knows, right? Ketamine is potently, acutely active. Within 24 hours, people feel significantly better, particularly when paired with therapy. So this is it's anti-suicidal. It reduces suicidal urges and thoughts, right? This is one of the most important tools in our mental health arsenal. It is hardly being used correctly. And so this is why the education about this is so important. We really need to be, and a big part of why I do this work is to make sure that we know what the evidence shows about these medicines and what they're teaching us, which is that we can relearn how to heal. We can remember how to heal ourselves. That's what these medicines are showing us. That's what the MDMA therapy long-term data shows us, is that we continue to get better. People continue to get better up to 12 months because we're teaching them or reminding our patients how to heal themselves again. We don't have we don't do anything in that 10-month period. They do it themselves on their own, and they have a great success rate. And that makes these medicines some of the most powerful tools to treat trauma that we've ever discovered. And again, indigenous cultures have known this forever. So we should be talking to them and integrating with them and doing more cross-cultural medical collaborations because they have known, and we're just catching up to show that what they're doing makes sense. Important caveat, psychedelic substances need to be used highly intentionally. They are not toys. They are not for random recreational use. They amplify all parts of awareness, and they can enhance, if they can enhance learning, they can enhance learning of things that serve us and things that don't. So they can enhance unintentional learning of undesirable practices and information. It's very important. And lastly, when misused and abused or used in the wrong people, these substances can increase and risk or unveil delusional disorders, psychotic disorders, personality disorders, psychosis, bipolar disorder. So people who have these disorders, these medicines are a no-no. They're not for everybody. So now I'm going to get into a new term we call neurocatalytic tools. Neurocatalytic is a new word because we needed a word to describe increasing brain functioning, enhancing neuroplasticity, and providing perspective and enhanced awareness. So there are 7 incredibly important neurocatalytic techniques. The first is intentional breathing. These are all the natural techniques, these are things we can all do. This is what I was mentioning earlier, is the source of the feeling of reminding ourselves what it feels like to feel in control. You do one of these things. As soon as you do one of these things, you feel safe again in your own body. As soon as you feel safe again in your own body, your body starts to heal itself, and you start to feel in control. As soon as you start doing these things. So these are like a gold mine of tools for us. And we as clinicians are always teaching our patients this, but it's sometimes hard to master. So just shout out to the natural practices. Then psychedelic substances are interesting because they're also neurocatalytic. They're like the medication version of a neurocatalytic tool. So they're mind revealing, they're non-specific amplifiers of awareness, and they increase neuroplasticity. And I'm going to broadly define psychedelics the way that neuroscience would define it, which is THC included, THC is mind revealing, ketamine included, phenethylamines, which include MDMA and mescaline family, and then the methamphetamine-derived psychedelics, and tryptamines, which are the psilocybin, LSD, DMT, ayahuasca family. So this is all of these substances can be used to increase neuroplasticity. And the reason why they work, and the reason why meditation works, and the reason why these mindfulness and gratitude techniques work is because they disrupt activity in this part of this network in the brain called the default mode network. And you don't need to remember much about this other than that typically in our day-to-day lives when we're at rest, all of these blue parts of the brain are talking to each other, as they should. But when we're recovering, when we're relaxing, when we're trying to heal, these parts of the brain are often still talking to each other when they should be kind of like turned down. And so what my colleagues who conducted these wonderful studies on the bottom, led by Dr. Rabin Harris, showed is that as you increase the amount of psychedelic medicine in somebody's system, like psilocybin or LSD, you see that this network, the default mode network, starts to dissolve and not be as active. And all these parts of the brain are still very active, but they're talking to other parts of the brain instead of these parts. They're not talking to their usual parts. And as you see that effect of this network dissolving, our sense of ego, self-protection, separation from others, loneliness, guarding, all of that just starts to dissolve with it. So this system correlates to those things: self-protection, guarding, right? Self-preservation. And the way to think about this is that a network is important because it protects us. It's a survival network, but it's not always required to be online, fully active. And it keeps us in the realm of what we know. Again, certainty. Certainty is helpful to us, or at least a sense of it. And that's like skiing down the same slope over and over and over again, building in these tight grooves to the point where you're just skiing down this groomed run and you're following your same tracks and you don't even need to think about it. I mean, it's like second nature. You're just like, let your hips do the work and you just go down the mountain. And then you have psychedelic medicines, or what we call like non-ordinary states of consciousness, which is the state that psychedelic medicines and meditation get us to. And that's like getting in the lift again on your ski run, and you go to the top of the lift, and as soon as you get to the top of the lift and you hop off, you realize, and when you look down the mountain, that 8 feet of fresh powder is dropped on top of the mountain. And you know where the bottom is, and you know you're at the top, but you have no idea what path you previously took to get down. So you can guess and try to follow the same path, or you can forge a new path. And with the guidance of a therapist, or and ideally a trained provider, we can help you safely find that new path. And so that is the effect that these tools have on helping us shift our perspective and shift consciousness. And these medicines actually do formally increase neuroplasticity. There's been multiple studies on psilocybin and increasing hippocampal neurogenesis, which is really surprising and amazing. That means like making the brain make new neurons. Ketamine increases hippocampal neurogenesis. Again, short-term memory center increasing new neuron generation is amazing, and making new neurons connect to each other better. And so, in summary, psychedelics really facilitate trauma healing by accelerating safety learning and fear extinction. Make sense? Following me? Okay, so now we get into the future of where we're going. So where we're going is that we have to accept the reality that not everybody's going to get access to psychedelic medicines, and not everybody, even if they were legal, all of them, right now it's only ketamine, but even if they were all legal, it would cost a lot of money and there'd be huge waits to get access to this. There's not enough trained providers. So we have to figure out how psychedelic medicines are getting us to these profound healing effects. How do they work? And then try to replicate them in non-drug ways, like using technology, to increase access to this safety benefits and the safety learning neuroplastic benefits. And we have to develop better biomarkers to understand what does healing actually look like. So I'm going to take number 2 first, quickly. This is an epigenetic study that we did with a collaboration I set up with Yale, Arizona State University, MAPS, the Board of Medicine, Mount Sinai, and USC, to actually collect a bunch of data, DNA samples, from subjects who were going through this MAPS 42 hours of MDMA, 3-dose MDMA study that I was telling you about. And so we collected their data before and after MDMA. And what you can see here is that the MDMA group has significantly more methylation, or significantly more changes in methylation at the NR3C1 site, which is this very important site that Rachel Yehuda discovered changes when we are traumatized. So when we experience trauma, or when animals are exposed to trauma, they get methylation at this site. The methylation at that site is what gets passed on to future generations that increases their chances of experiencing mental illness and trauma. All of a sudden, we do an intense 12 weeks, 42 hours of 3-dose MDMA safety relearning treatment with these folks, and that part that gets passed on is starting to repair, which means that the memory of trauma on the DNA, the part of our bodies that stores information that gets passed to our offspring, that traumatic memory is getting remediated. It's getting repaired. So I remember I mentioned earlier that the reason why epigenetics is so interesting to think about that as where disease is stored rather than genetics is because genetics can't be changed. Epigenetics can be changed. These people who had this experience had incredible outcomes. Like these people entered remission. And the most interesting thing is that the amount of change they had here in this NR3C1 site on the cortisol receptor, the amount of change with MDMA was directly proportionate to how much better they got. So trauma is reversible and repairable. The traumatic memories are reversible and repairable, and the impact, we can't make the memories go away, but the impact that those memories have on our bodies is repairable. And whether we pass that down or not is actually more of a choice now than it's ever been. And so we wanted to try to figure out, going back to point one, how do we replicate the safety benefits to help more people heal without requiring MDMA, because MDMA is still illegal. So if you have an iPhone, scan that link real quick, or take a picture and scan it later. This is going to take you to the App Store to download the Apollo app, which came out of this research that we were doing. And this is a tool that we use that I'm wearing. Anyone can try it afterwards, or you can try it on your phone, that uses very gentle vibration frequencies that feel like a cat purring or feel like ocean waves washing over you, that nudge our bodies into what's called a coherent state, which is where our heart and lungs match in resonant frequency. And in that state, when our heart and lungs start to resonate together, that is a signature of a safety state. That's when vagus nerve activity, parasympathetic activity starts to go up. So if you download this and you open it on your app when it downloads, if you have enough service, just as soon as you open the app, you'll start to feel your phone vibrate gently. This is all free, by the way. Just take your phone and just place it gently against your chest as you feel it vibrate. And you'll feel this gentle ocean wave-like vibration. And where this is going is kind of where AI needs to go for us in healthcare, which is that we have all this data. So what are we doing with it? How are we using the data to make everybody healthier? How are we using the data to deliver on the promise of personalized medicine? We have wearables, we have your calendar app, we have Apple Health, we have your phone, we have the weather, we have all these things around you, your medical records if you want to share them with us. And yet we don't have any way to actually yet give you personalized health improvements based on that data until Apollo. And this technology that we developed at the University of Pittsburgh by studying the safety pathway of MDMA and psychedelic medicine really was discovered as a way to take the data that comes out of your devices and then automatically send this vibration signal to the body, because this vibration signal tunes our nervous system. And this is how two ways that people use it. There's a wearable version. If you want to try it, come find me. Or the mobile app version. If you have an iPhone, you can try it for free. These vibrations, again, just by holding them to our bodies, just like why it feels good to get a hug from somebody you like, or to have somebody hold your hand, or hold a purring dog or cat, or go to the beach and notice the sound of the ocean waves crashing. It's somewhere between 5 and 7 times per minute oscillations. 5 to 7 breaths per minute, 5 to 7 times the waves crash every minute, 5 to 7 times that the cat purrs every minute. This is not coincidence. These rhythms are the same because we are like the animals and we are linked with nature. And when we are harmonious with nature, we feel better, and our bodies operate in a more healthy state. And so we did a bunch of clinical studies, some of which were done with IHMC long ago, and now this technology is proven in 17 clinical trials, and over 2,000 research subjects, and we have 4 published studies, 8 more under peer review, and this technology is actually improving people's health. This first study was the very first study ever to show that a wearable technology something you wear and don't interact with, improves heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is the leading metric that predicts longevity, health span, human performance, physical and mental, and recovery and resistance to illness, mental and physical. Heart rate variability, important biomarker. It's measured by almost every single wearable tracker. And Apollo is the only technology that increases it just by wearing it, by just feeling the vibrations. Another study that came out in 2025 in a very severe autoimmune disorder called systemic sclerosis, it's a terminal illness, showed that just using Apollo for, I believe the study was 4 weeks, using Apollo for 4 weeks, people were asked to use it for 15 minutes. On average, they used it for over 2.5 hours, and it improved symptoms of fatigue. I'm just listing significant improvements, not the trending stuff. Fatigue, Raynaud phenomena symptoms, increased vascular dilation, mood was improved, depression symptoms, sleep was improved, and anxiety and stress and overall quality of life and ability to socialize were improved in this population. We have a study under review now for metastatic breast cancer patients who have no response to any of the medications they're given. They have the exact same response as these folks who have systemic sclerosis. Why would a cancer pain population with metastatic breast cancer respond to a vibration, a sound wave vibration, the same way that folks with a theoretically unrelated autoimmune disorder respond? Because both metastatic cancer and severe autoimmune diseases like systemic sclerosis result in a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. They result in increased activation of the stress response system and decreased activation of the vagus nerve. Apollo vibrations restore that. You can also do it by doing deep breathing for free, but we forget. So last study that came out recently from Washington State University, this is just a month or two ago, showed that using Apollo in medical students and pharmacy students for, I believe this was also 4 weeks, significantly reduced burnout scores, improved quality of life, reduced stress. So this has massive implications for first responder communities. We work with a lot of first responders, and it's just very exciting to have more tools for those of us that do that. And then we released an AI software in 2023. This most important thing that's interesting about this is when you combine the concept of feeling safe with sound waves, which is what Apollo is, with AI, what you get is something that allows us to detect things that you don't know are happening. Like when you wake up in the middle of the night. We don't usually know before we wake up. We usually know when we're waking up or have woken up already. So what we did is we trained Apollo to track sleep. And now Apollo can not only track sleep, but it knows when you're about to wake up and you're sleeping restlessly before you're awake, and can turn on in real time to prevent the wake up. And we see that people get over 60 minutes more sleep a night, each night. So it's like 7 hours more sleep each week. Yes, absolutely. It's like 2.5 times Ambien, just by increasing your vagus nerve activity, just by calming your body. And again, we could get that much more sleep every night if we trained in deep breathing or yoga nidra or any of these known techniques. We can get that same effect on our own. It just takes a ton of work. And our patients didn't have the wherewithal when they were really struggling to do it, so we needed a tool for them, and then we realized that this was actually really great for us too, so we all use it. And this is just a summary of some of the findings that we've seen in these folks. So this is real published data that what is possible when you calm your body. What is possible with deep breathing, meditation, mindfulness, regular exercise, like making all the right life choices, you can achieve this, or you can use a technology that helps you achieve it and then make better life choices with technology assistance. But the point is, this is what's possible. And we can actually do better than this. This is just phase 1. So the number one neuroscience takeaway to wrap up is that safety is required for learning and healing. Apollo is proof of concept of that. It is a technology designed to make us feel safe. MDMA is a psychedelic drug designed to activate safety pathways. They make healing faster. They're not the source of it, we're the source of it. But the safety that they augment is required. Whether we do it ourselves or whether it's drug or technology facilitated, it's required for learning and healing. And there are lots of tools available to help. And one of my favorite tools, it's really easy, is just to remind ourselves that we are all worthy of love. Just by being born human, we are all worthy of love. And we can remind ourselves and our friends and family of that every day. So thank you.
So we have some time for questions. I do want to tell y'all that I've been wearing Apollo all day today. Do you notice how calm I am? Nothing you could do would bother me right now, just saying. Okay, some questions. Olivia, you're going to be with him later? Okay. Questions? Yep. Okay. Can I throw this? Here, talk into the mic.
Oh. How does the Apollo differ from like other vagal nerve stimulators?
So that's a great question. Apollo is a indirect, the official title of this kind of technology is an indirect vagus nerve modulator. So first difference is it's not directly activating the vagus nerve. It's activating the vagus nerve through the touch receptor system. Typical vagus nerve stimulators activate the vagus nerve directly with electricity. So we're not doing that. We want it to be able to be worn anywhere on the body. So through the sense of touch, we can activate the vagus nerve indirectly. Number two is that it uses sound waves, not electricity. So what you feel coming out of your phone or what you feel coming out of the wearable is sound only, not radio waves, not microwaves, not electricity. It's just sound. And if you hold it really close to your ear, you can hear it. It's like what comes out of a subwoofer. Sound is much more palatable and soothing to the body than electrical shocks, even though electrical shock stimulators work. Don't get me wrong, I've used a lot of them, like they work. But getting people to keep using them regularly or allowing people to use them when they're doing other tasks is very challenging. The last piece is that it's a modulator of vagus nerve. Apollo is a modulator, not a stimulator. Stimulators only increase activity in the vagus nerve. Apollo can turn it up or down. So when would you maybe want less vagus nerve activity? Like when you're really, really tired and you can't get the energy to get up. You want just sympathetic tone for the most part in those moments. If you have too much vagus nerve activity in those moments, you're not going to give yourself enough of the juice you need to get going. So this as a modulator works like music. You know how sometimes you listen to music give you energy and help you dance or work out or cook or whatever, and then other times you listen to music to meditate or sleep? Completely different energy states. You wouldn't mix that music, right? So those are also modulating vagus nerve activity. Music modulates vagus nerve activity. So this works in that way by changing the frequency and rhythm to either turn vagus nerve activity up or down rather than just up.
Questions in the back while I'm here? Okay. Oh, sir, hold on, I got you, ma'am. Wait, sir?
You're so relaxed, I thought maybe, do you want to give me your car keys?
No, no, thanks. It doesn't make me dumb. Do you have a question? Okay, all right. Next, here you go.
Years ago, I cut out a Ziggy cartoon where he's walking out of the psychiatrist's office, and the psychiatrist is saying, all he needed was a hug, but there's no money in that. So I'm wondering if you could make up a scientific term for hug and an insurance code for it so that somebody can make money on hugs.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. And I think the other piece of the hug is helping people feel heard and seen, right? We need to be acknowledged. We need to be heard, we need to be seen, and we need to be safe enough to feel our feelings. And that's what we are supposed to be getting from our friends and family, but we often don't. So we go to a therapist or we go to a doctor to get it, and sometimes we get it there and sometimes we don't, right? And so I think so to your point, unfortunately, our medical system is very capitalist, right? Like it's a very money-focused, business-focused medical system. And so that's why we're really trying to get back to what does the science say, right? What does the science say about hugs and touch and eye contact, empathy, right? Like you can change somebody's entire outlook and your outlook on an entire day by just making eye contact and smiling at a stranger walking down the street, right? You can make your entire day turn around with one nonverbal interaction. That's incredible. And what is most people don't talk about this. I talk about this in some of my addiction lectures, but when you look at the science of money, what does money do? Well, it activates your reward center of your brain, which happens to be the same part of your brain that snorting a line of cocaine activates. And whenever you have money, you just want more, and it's never enough, and then you just keep doing things to get more, right? And you don't care about what everybody else has, right? You're just hoarding mindset. So like when we think about the neuroscience of how money impacts the brain, money is highly addictive, like cocaine level addictive. So we need to be really careful and thoughtful about how we use it and not let it disrupt the healthcare and the delivery of something that's like so sacred like human connection.
Hey, thank you for your talk tonight. Very informative. You talked about patients who have epigenetic trauma being able to repair that through therapy and treatment. When a patient does that or a person does that, is that reparation stable, or does that require continued work, just like going to the gym, right? You got to keep going to keep getting the benefit.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
So we're in the early days of studying that, to be perfectly honest. I think that I can say with confidence that the changes we're seeing, the epigenetic changes we're seeing, are durable at a year. So that's pretty good. Durable at a year with an unclear amount of work. We don't know, because there wasn't follow-up done during that period, so we don't know how much those people did of their own accord during that time. But the point is that if they're self-motivated enough to do anything to help themselves, when they before like had trouble getting out of bed and couldn't work a job and spent almost no time with their families and ate alone, and you get the picture, that's a huge improvement. And so I think the most likely answer is that the change is durable at a year from what we see so far with something like MDMA-assisted therapy. The epigenetic change appears to be durable at a year, but that practice is important, right? And I think that's another key point here is like we can't just do one thing and feel like it's a success in that moment and then just expect the effects to last forever. If we go back to our old habits, we will go back to the old way. And so there are certain routines and practices that are, probably pretty essential that don't take a lot of time. We're talking like maybe 10 or 20 minutes a day, right? But not a ton of time. But 10 or 20 minutes a day of call it mental emotional hygiene that keeps people in a good spot, keeps us all in a good spot.
Yeah, one more question. Okay, thank you for coming. I got to say, sure. My mind's reeling. When you talked about mental illness, you talked about depression. The mental illness that has impacted my life the most is bipolar. My sister-in-law died in early death, not directly related, but people with bipolar don't live the healthiest lives. Yeah. My mother died at 57 from bipolar. My son died by suicide because he was bipolar. How about more serious schizophrenia, bipolar? Do these get helped with a device like this, with your background?
With the technology, yes. With psychedelics, no. So that was a big part of why we developed, why we developed Apollo was because there's so many, you saw the list of people who can't have psychedelic medicines, right? Which include psychosis, bipolar personality disorder. These folks are really not good candidates because the risk of the medicine making them worse is so great. And so even with well-trained providers like me, I would not administer that medicine to someone with bipolar disorder.
Okay.
So, but that's why we developed the technology, is because the technology is useful for bipolar, schizophrenia, pregnant women use it, elderly folks with dementia use it, children use it. So it's widely tolerated.
So right now, you're telling me sleep with my iPhone to get better sleep?
No, don't sleep with your iPhone. No. Yeah,
I
the
want to
iPhone's
know
not for sleep.
when can I get the Apollo wearable so I can get better sleep?
Oh, you can get it at this website, apolloneuro.com. And if you download the app and you have an iPhone, you can purchase it through the app as well.
And
But-
how much?
But the wearable is out. It's been out since 2020.
How much are they?
Sorry, what was that? The wearable works with Android. The mobile app is brand new, and the iPhone experience is only for iPhone because Android phones all have different motors, and we really wanted to do it with Android, but you have to code it separately for each phone's type. And I'll also, by the way, if anybody wants to write this down, if you are interested in the wearable, you can use Clinic 90 off, which will give you a $90 off discount on the wearable if you decide to purchase it. No pressure, of course.
I want to thank you. Okay, we're one last. That's all we gotta. Sorry, cut it off.
I see an app here for Apollo Neuro on Android phone.
That's for the wearable.
Google Play, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, y'all. Let's thank Dave for being here tonight.
Thank you.